Alright guys, Lord Nolan here, and today I'm going to be talking about why Sweet from San Andreas was actually a good character. Okay, so I was watching like several videos on YouTube about how Sweet, CJ's older brother from San Andreas, was like this annoying, uncompromising, ignorant character or whatever. Like how they're saying he wasn't authentic to like what a gangster in that time period would have been. They're saying how he was stuck in a mindset that wouldn't help his family grow or whatever. And I can understand how some of those points might look if you aren't, for one, if you're not necessarily a black person, two, a minority in general, or three, somebody who grew up in the time before like the internet and cell phones being a big thing and all that stuff like that. Like, you forget Sweet was growing up, he was like, and I don't know if he's an 80s baby, but he's like somewhere between like 70s and 80s baby. This dude's like, he's already grown in the 90s. So he grew up in an era of gangsters that was before crack. And when you get gangbangers that were before crack, it was usually like they were on some protect everybody in the neighborhood stuff. Like the gangs in that neighborhood were literally there because the police were abusing them, other races were abusing them in their neighborhoods, or you had people that were trying to push like hardcore drugs like heroin and stuff like that in their neighborhoods. This is before it was like widespread and crazy like that. But like back in those days, there was still drugs, and there was still there was still crime. Obviously, people were getting robbed because some people were broke. People were getting beat up just because they were different. This is an era of racial intolerance. Still, it's not like the civil rights movement just was ending. People were trying to find their footing in where they fit in society, and while they were doing that, they were kind of competing for who would be the dominant, technically the dominant race in that region. This is that time frame. So Sweet wanting to protect the neighborhood it's kind of like that was his job. That was literally him as a gangster from that time period, when the transition between neighborhood protector to neighborhood exploiter, the drug dealers that came out of the crack epidemic and stuff like that. In that transitional period, there were some gangsters that didn't want to go into drugs, and there were some gangsters who did. And Sweet was one of the gangsters who didn't want to get into drugs. That's what he did. He wanted to protect his neighborhood. He wanted to keep drugs out of the neighborhood. He didn't want a bunch of junkies. He didn't want all his friends and family to be, drugged out, having no purpose in life, being, in these crack dens that you see in the game. He didn't want them dying of ODs. He didn't want them dying to make enough money to get their next fix because they had to go out and rob somebody. They had to go out and shoot somebody or something like that in order to just get enough money so they can get more crack. Crack was a big deal. And especially in that time period, crack hit every neighborhood heavily. So you really didn't want that in your neighborhood, but a lot of people would bring it to your neighborhood because it meant money for them. And with crack, it was so addictive that these people would come back regularly, and then they'd have like their friends come back, because then that means there's more of them, so that they can probably pool more money together so they can all get crack. And they'll bring like their spouses, they'll steal from their family, they'll steal from their job, they'll go and just rob things in general to get more crack. And all of that money that's being taken out of your neighborhood, away from hard working people, away from the jobs in the area, away from business owners and all that, is being put into the pockets of the drug dealer. And usually these drug dealers weren't, reinvesting it into the neighborhood. Now sometimes they did, because some drug dealers, they wanted, if they were gonna see their people get exploited, they were gonna be the ones exploiting them, type thing. So it was like, if anybody's gonna exploit our neighborhood, like, it's gonna be us that's from the neighborhood, and then we'll use the money that we get from the what they were gonna give to somebody outside of here. We'll use that money to build up the neighborhood type stuff. And it happened every now and then. It didn't happen like all the time, but it happened every now and then. But Sweet was one that was like, he just didn't want it in general. He just didn't want people hooked on it. He saw what it did to other neighborhoods. He saw what it did to people. He saw what it did to people he cared about, and he didn't want it in the neighborhood. So him always telling Big Smoke he didn't want it in the neighborhood, that's honestly a good character. And then when his brother is always trying to say, like, you gotta leave, we should get out of here, we gotta leave. Well, who's gonna protect the neighborhood when they leave? Because you gotta understand, it's not just him and his family and a couple of gangbangers that are with them. It's the neighborhood. It's all the people that live in these houses on Grove Street, all the people that live in the houses around Grove Street, the business owners that live around Grove Street, all those people, all those businesses, all that stuff is his responsibility. Those people are looking to him in most cases to be the guy that keeps out the other gangbangers, the other elements of the underworld, the drug dealers that are trying to push these drugs to their children or to them or to a family member that's going to end up robbing them and making the neighborhood unsafe. Like, his job is to make sure the neighborhood is safe. It's not just him and his family that he's worried about. It's him, his family, his friends, his gang, and the neighborhood, the entire neighborhood. Like, that's what people forget about gangs back in those days. There were gangsters that, like, literally they were the person looking out for the entire neighborhood. The whole neighborhood knew them. And like, gangsters in the times before it was exploitive, like, they were like kind of like the shield between corrupt individuals and law enforcement, other gangs, and in large parts the drug trade being pushed in their neighborhood. So a lot of people, even though these people are supposedly outlaws and stuff, they would look to these people with respect. They had a name in the neighborhood. People's like grandmas would bring them food and stuff. Like they were invited to barbecues and cookouts. They would throw barbecues and cookouts that the neighborhood would come to. Like, the people in around them, like, they wouldn't be so crazy upset if a relative of theirs was part of this gang, because it looked out for the neighborhood. It was kind of like a badge of honor in those days, in that time frame, in that type of gang. It was kind of a badge of honor to be the one of the guys that defended the neighborhood. So, like, Sweet not wanting to leave, even though his family has like a millionaire in it and they run all this other stuff, like, what about all the people that what about all the people in the neighborhood? Like Carl never thought about that. Kendall, it was never her responsibility. That's not her job to do that. So even Sweet was like, yo, you don't need to be here. This isn't your job. This isn't what you need to do. As long as you're cool, you come back and visit where your home is, where we stay, and you're taking care of business, he's fine. Like, he doesn't want Kendall here. But Carl, he's about that action and he's in that life. He should have been bringing that money back into the neighborhood and reinvesting it in the people that helped his entire family get where they are today. Like, yeah, Carl is a badass, but at the same time, he abandoned the people that needed him the most several times in this game. And not only that, he tries to abandon them again at the end. If it wasn't for Sweet, him and Kendall would have left, and there would have been nobody to watch after the people that literally relied on them to keep the bad people at bay. Like, imagine if Tenpenny and the Ballers got on Grove Street. All the people in those houses are either strung out, getting robbed, or they're gonna get thrown out. They're getting strung out, robbed, murdered, or thrown out, or extorted, whatever. Their children are gonna become part of this organization that's now took over the neighborhood, that will do the same thing to the next generations and the generations after that. It's been seen before. So Sweet doesn't want that to happen to the neighborhood he grew up in, where his mom lived, where his families lived, where his family home is. They have 2 houses on this street. One is Sweet's, one is their family home. Like they have literally the cul-de-sac is mostly them. Like they like it seems like people forget that sometimes in these like scenarios, the gang that runs an area are the people that are keeping other people safe. Like that's what people forget sometimes. That's why sometimes gangs can be so entrenched in a neighborhood, because that gang is literally the only thing standing between people getting robbed and murdered and extorted and pimped out and human trafficked and, you know, strung out and all that stuff. They're the only line of defense, because the police won't know all the details, because if they, you know, sometimes in certain areas they're just not good people. And sometimes they're on the other side. Sometimes the police are being paid off by the people that are about to do all this stuff to you. I'm not saying all of them, I'm just saying sometimes. And then sometimes, you know, these altercations will happen where, you know, someone innocent gets hurt. And it's because, you know, the people that were defending the neighborhood, like the, you know, the people that are supposed to, like the police or whatever, they only come after something happens. These people are there all the time. Like sometimes things will occur and the police will have to come after. They won't know before. They'll either come after or during. There's never a before this crime happens. The gangsters, they live there. Their house is right here. Their house is right there. Like they're standing in the driveway. You know, even if they're shooting dice on the sidewalk where, you know, your kids play hopscotch just a little bit over. And if anybody comes and messes with your kid playing hopscotch, you got 7 dudes over there ready to beat the hell out of the person that's messing with your kid playing hopscotch. You know, whatever. Like this is the time period that we're talking about. So Sweet being this way, it doesn't surprise me. And it's not a bad character. In all honesty, Sweet is one of the most, you know, endearing characters in the entire game. Like CJ's kind of a dick, you know. Kendall, she's about her own thing. She was never part of that life. She's doing her own stuff. She's a strong woman. She's doing her own thing. She got a man that's, you know, she's seeing beyond racial boundaries. She's bringing gangs together and stuff like that. So even in her own way, she's still helping the city out too. Like, so she may not be part of that single gang, but even, you know, in her own way, in her own lane, she's doing something. Like, you know, Kendall and Sweet are 2 of the people that do the most for the city, besides Carl, who, you know, he does all the legwork. You know, if behind the scenes, Sweet and Kendall, they're making sure that stuff stays together. You know, Carl is obviously the muscle. That's his job, which is why him leaving, you know, 5 years before the game starts is so tough for everybody. Like, everybody's like, yo, like, you just left us when we needed you. Like, you're our best guy. You left us when we needed you. You know, and you know, it's sad to see that people don't see the nuances in characters in, you know, based off of time periods. They just kind of write them off as somebody who, you know, is a dumb character. Sweet is actually a really good character. And that being said, you know, maybe next time you look at a character from a video game or a movie or a cartoon or something like that, you think about where they're coming from, and you'll see how they're actually sometimes some low-key great characters that people don't, they get slept on. Hold on out.